there's a lot I want to talk about in this lab, but it's like no other lab I've ever seen in reality or on screen.
This was the one that nearly finished us off.
Welcome to Inside the Set with SETDECOR, a series that focuses on the design and decor of the stories that excite us and ignite our imagination, where we discuss the collaboration between set decorators and production designers and hear first-hand accounts of how these works of art came to be, from their inception, ideas on a page, to completion, when we get to sit in the dark and experience them collectively.
Welcome to Inside the Set with SETDECOR. I am Claudia Bonfe, SDSA. Today, I'm excited to welcome set decorator Jille Azis and production designer Kasra Farahani to discuss their collaboration and imaginative work on the Fantastic Four First Steps. Jille and Kasra, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
First of all, I want to congratulate the both of you for your recent nomination of the Critics' Choice Award for Production Design. Bravo.
Thank you.
Quite exciting that was. Well done.
Yes.
Yeah, well done, Jille. Yeah.
You should be so happy. And
Yeah, our team did a great job.
this is your second joint project together. I would love to hear about both of your extensive design career backgrounds and training and how you came together for Marvel's Loki Season 2, and then how did that transpire into working on the Fantastic Four?
Well, the first season of Loki, as you may remember, Claudia, we did in Atlanta, Georgia, with you and on the team. And we had a great start for the look of the world, but for the second season, we were going to the UK. Everything packed up and went there. And I was lucky enough to be connected to Jille through a production designer that she just worked with, as a colleague of mine. And it was the best connection I could have hoped for. And Jille and her incredibly talented team, of which there was significant overlap from Loki Season 2 and Fantastic Four, were wonderful to work with, were so creative, had so many great ideas, so skillfully bridged the gap of trying to find quasi-American looking mid-century decor while being based in the UK, and brought so much innovation and unexpected looking decor to really make the second season feel related to the first season, but entirely its own, and strange in a way that, as you know, Claudia, is a big priority of mine to always really like things to feel strange, because I think it's a big part of why they feel new and novel to people. And we had a really, really good working relationship. And so when this Fantastic Four project came across my desk, and I knew once again it was going to be in the UK, Jille was honestly my very first call. And the experience was fantastic. It was hard. Then I'll stop talking, Jille, so you can jump in. But due to a lot of reasons that had nothing to do with our departments, the lion's share, I'd say, like the four kind of largest sets that we had to do on this film came due in the first kind of quarter or third of the shooting schedule. So we were very, very front loaded on many sets that were, full or extensive builds, very technical in the sense that everything from the decor to the set was very often designed and built from scratch in many cases. And they just had a lot of scale. So we're talking about Times Square, which we built Times Square at 2/3 scale of the actual Times Square. And that was one of the four of these sets I'm talking about. So that was a big challenge, and it was definitely hard. It would be disingenuous to say otherwise, to cover that much ground at quality in such a compressed timeline. And Jille, I feel like in a former life, she was a general in the military or something, in the way that she's able. The number of people working for her and the degree of organization, and Jille's lists, all the lists, and like when I'd come into her office for a meeting, like she'd have everything in envelopes for different sets, and then we pull out all the things, bullet pointed questions, and then when her questions were answered, she'd stop me and move to the next envelope for the next set, and we move through that, and it was in this way that we were able to do what by rights we shouldn't have been able to do, I think.
So Jille, why don't you tell me about your design background and how it brought you to doing the Fantastic Four?
Yeah. Well, I studied interior architecture at art school. And then I came out of art school, and I had a friend who was working in the film industry. He'd been at the Royal College of Art in London, and Stuart Craig, the very famous designer, British designer who's just died, he had put a note up saying, anybody want to work on a film? And my friend answered this ad. So consequently, I got to see my first film, which was Elephant Man. And I managed to meet David Lynch and Anthony Hopkins and Anne Bancroft. I didn't know who any of these people were. I was a very naive art student. But anyway, I then called up about my first job, and I was told that they didn't employ women. So that was a sort of interesting, moment. And I sort of didn't really take any notice of that and said, could I still go up and see them? And subsequently, I got that job. But I never told them I had a degree or I was, I was trained in art in a way, and started basically as a runner and started working my way up. I was very lucky because I worked with a set decorator who's now a designer, Crispian Salas, and I worked with him on a film, met him, and we got on really well. His next film was a Bond film, and then it's sort of 27, I was assistant set decorator on a Bond film, which is extraordinary. I mean, it's sort of, that probably would never happen now.
It's a dream job for all decorators.
Flying to Paris business class and, just a massive responsibility. We hardly had any teams then. I mean, we didn't have, a laptop. We didn't have computers. I mean, it was really crazy. So I did that and I worked on film. So I trained in features, and then I sort of got a bit disillusioned slightly with features at that time. And I was offered a commercial by a Canadian director called Bruce Dowd. And I did my first commercial, and actually turned out the same time that I was having a family. So in fact, I did commercials, which I think in everything I would say, that period of, 8 or 9 years where I art directed commercials was singly the thing that really taught me how to deal with pressure and to make decisions quickly. It really was a fantastic experience. And I came back into film, and Gladiator 1 was my first film back in with Crispian. And then it sort of carried on from there. But relating to Marvel, so I'd worked with Cara Brower, who recommended me very kindly to Kasra on the Marvels. And it was my first Marvel show. And I have to say, I really enjoyed it. My experience of Marvel is they really value the creative and appreciate the creative. So it was a really good experience, and I got together a really nice team, and they all really enjoyed it. And then when Kasra approached me about Loki, I was super excited to do it because I loved the first show. I was a huge fan. And I also think that the set deck team on Loki 1 did a stunning job. So we inherited, container after container, all this fantastic stuff.
Right.
So that was a real joy to put together. And then we had our own sets to do. But it was great having that, those first sets that we could put together and curate. And then from Loki, and in fact, it's interesting working for Kasra because he's got a very specific vision. And at the beginning of Loki, I was like, do I understand his vision? Do I, am I? And I think it's really interesting working with a designer as a decorator. And for me, it's about understanding who that person is and what their requirements are and what their vision is and how I can, I'm the person that can go out and see things. They're mainly in the office. So it's, for us to go out and my team to go out and really find the joy and the interesting things and bring it back in, so they can use them. I felt on Loki, I think it took me a little while just to understand, especially because Kasra had done season 1. So we were like, oh, how do we do it? How do we do it as good? But I think at the end of Loki, we really felt, I think Kasra would agree, we really understood each other and we understood, Kasra's attention to detail, which sometimes drove us mad, but I
don't know what you're talking about.
Well, exactly. I'm a huge fan of his, and I think that I absolutely trust him. So, however painful sometimes it is, not because of Kasra, but because of the time, the time ratio of trying to get things done. My mantra to my team is, listen, Kasra has a vision. We're going to try as hard as possible to create that. So off we went, onto Fantastic Four, which I have to say was a great experience.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I think, I don't want to talk too much about Loki, but your sets in season 2 were, you brought it and it looked different than season 1, but it still was the TVA and you made it your own. And I really enjoyed looking at all the details of the sets. So you did an amazing job.
I think we were quite lucky that we had some period, a different period set to do.
The Art Deco,
and I think that was, I suppose, something that I felt quite confident in because I've dealt with a lot of, period dressing. So that was quite exciting for me. So I could, bring Kasra things. What about this and what about that? That hadn't already been designed, on Loki 1. So that was quite exciting.
Yeah, it looked great. Well, so I'd love to start talking about the sets on Fantastic Four. In the establishing scene of where the elevator doors open to the main living space of the Baxter building, you see a lovely kinetic mobile sculpture suspended from the ceiling with a dual purpose mid-century modern fireplace, tulip base surrounded by a sunken blue sofa. Behind that setup is a gorgeous arched picture window with incredible cityscape views beyond. This establishing shot is stunning, Jille and Kasra. You both have perfected the 1960s retrofuturism environments. Please tell me what inspired your design and decorating decisions here.
Actually, I think Kasra should probably start because, to be honest, it starts with him. But I'll tell you the story about the kinetic sculpture after he's told you about the...
Oh, okay.
Oh, no. The general kind of challenge, I think, for this apartment was to create a home in basically a New York penthouse in a piece of architecture that is maybe kind of more associated with a kind of luxurious type of lifestyle, which can easily feel cold. The challenge here was to create a warm home where a family could live and where a child could could grow up. That was the kind of broad sense of it. And so I think a lot of it was through materials, through the decor, absolutely, through the textiles, through the plantings. These are all the kind of critical tools used to soften the kind of imposing quality of the space that you inherit when you're working on a space of this scale. So that was the kind of balance that we were trying to find.
Were there any architects that inspired you from the time period?
Oh, 100%. So I think I can offer as a blanket statement that the work of two architects were absolutely the lighthouse for so many of the form language decisions that we made. And that's Eero Saarinen and Oscar Niemeyer, who in my mind, those two architects, their work represents to me a sort of very refined version of retrofuturism, which, you know, there was a kind of a naive and joyful look towards the jet age and space travel and all of these things in all things design, starting really in the kind of 30s and 40s, but I think it hit its critical mass in the 50s, where everything started to have bullet tips and fins and chrome trim lines and things like that. But there was a sort of naive and sort of jokey quality, excessively whimsical quality to some of that I think by the 60s starts to burn off. And in the work of Niemeyer and Saarinen, you have the kind of all the dynamism and acceleration and forward kind of thrust of the curves of that era, and all the sort of silliness has gone away and has been replaced by really, really elegant proportions and carefully selected and restrained palettes of material. So that was the kind of the broad architectural kind of ethos of this. But the thing is, the work of those two architects is at times very monumental. And that brings back to kind of what I was saying before, which is that scale of monument needed to be reined in and kept intimate and warm in order for this to feel like where a family could live. And some of that was achieved by this kind of wooden dome structure. You see this sort of envelope of a cabin within a penthouse is the way I sort of think about this, where created this wooden domed structure, and within it, a conversation pit that's all upholstered and carpeted. And within that, there's a fire. So you're creating a sort of soft, warm nest in this apartment within the envelope of a kind of ostentatious New York skyscraper. But yeah, like I was saying before, the critical component to bring it to the human scale and give it the warmth is the decor. And also the specificity and miscellany, the kind of magazines laid out, and the mug of tea, and all the specifics. And this image shows great specificity of like the messiness of what it's like to have a young child. And Jille and her team did an incredible job of like creating these specific miscellaneous items but still felt absolutely part of the world. Yeah, it was a pleasure to see these kind of theoretical designs take on that specific life in the work that Jille's team did.
Yeah, Jille, I love the blue on blue, the blue carpet with the blue upholstery. Tell me how you approached this set.
Well, obviously, as Kasra said, the architecture is monumental. And I think what's interesting to note on this, and it's true when you work with Kasra, mostly the concepts of which some of the pictures you've shown are the original concepts. Honestly, when we see this, and Kasra and I discuss this, we try to get as close to the concept as possible, because that's the vision Marvel have approved, that's the vision Kasra wants. So we go all out to see how close we can get. and we had great fun designing and building the kitchen. We found this lovely reference, this little video of the kitchen of the future. And the white object at the back is a fridge that turns, and there's a sort of an oven with a glass dome, and there was a dishwasher that we made at the back. So everything here has been, including the lighting, it's all been handmade for the show. So I have an incredible team of art directors and draftspeople that draw this up, and Kasra approves the drawings. We go through it in detail, and then we have model makers that build all of this. And honestly, it's absolute magic what they achieve. Yeah. Ty Teager, our property master, and his team are just incredible. I mean, it's sort of easy to draw something in a way, but actually make it and paint it. We have a wonderful painter, Jess, who's really such a talent. And then we go out and collect, different fabrics and tiling. We did a lot of, choices on tiling. So really we take the concept as our inspiration, and then we search out materials. We had the different carpets up in the bedroom. The design on the carpet was printed in Belgium, and then it was sent here, and it had to be fitted absolutely correctly. So the big light fitting in the middle, that was handmade. We found the glass balls, and then we made light fitting. So the whole thing is curated and designed, and I think it's amazing of the team that they can do this. It really is a privilege to work with these people. And then we also had fun. My lovely assistant set decorator, Candice, we had fun, finding real period items to go into this world. And I think getting the match of what they were that then fitted into the sort of fantasy world we'd created. And I think it was fun for all of us, as Kasra says, to work on a superhero home, and especially with a baby involved. It's just really enjoyable to decide, well, what toys would the baby have, and what crib would the baby have, and we all, Candice and I had lots of fun, and in fact she's pregnant at the moment, which is very exciting.
Oh wow, that is exciting.
So we had lots of fun, choosing sort of what baby stuff we'd have, and the mobile light in the middle of the sort of seating area in the living room, that took some drawing, can I tell you? I mean, I'm not sure how many times we drew it, because it was really quite hard to get the scale right. And then having drawn it, the guys had to make it, and obviously with a mobile like that, it has to balance. Honestly, it was really, quite a tough assignment, but wow, I mean, it looked great in the end. It was fantastic.
Oh, I studied this photo, and I was just staring at the balance.
I know. I mean, I honestly don't know how they did that. I mean, that was sort of crazy.
Yeah.
And then a lovely special effects team put sort of coals into the fire, and then it had the fireplace had a fire in it, and then a working TV.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So that was all, really good fun.
It's definitely worth calling out Dan Kearns and his amazing team of set dec art directors for the patience. They worked on that mobile for a long time. It was James, that's right, yeah.
I think it was James that drew it up, and it was. And sometimes, being a set decorator is not just about making the creative decisions. It's sort of giving tea and sympathy to people who are, on the edge of a nervous breakdown.
Yeah. I think it was
worth it. It looks incredible.
Exactly.
And it's the first thing you see when the trailer came out.
Yeah.
I love it.
And I think it, I think the visual effects, I think the skyline looks absolutely great. It was a very, everything had to be sort of perfect. Some sets you dress and they're very forgiving, everything had to be absolutely perfect. And I think, and lovely the mosaics on the side walls
Yeah.
done by our graphics team. And
Yeah.
Kasra had found this way of printing a mosaic. So the paint layers are built up so that it's actually a mosaic made of paint. And it's a really successful technique. And our wonderful graphics team really did a great job there. And then Candice and I had great fun dressing the bar. Always good fun dressing a bar. Just
I don't
wish
remember
we'd
any
had-
scenes at the bar, but it looks
No.
Yes, I
really
just
cool.
sometimes wish they would have just made me a nice dry martini to, get
Yes.
me through the day. But
Well, those mirrored tiles, which were
Oh, yes.
inspired by a piece of reference from a Paul Rudolph interior, I believe. Those were really tricky.
yes.
Poor Candice, Jilly's assistant decorator in the set, was pulling options for that for quite a long time to find the right one, because it's always concerning for a DP when you tell them you're going to put a mirrored surface in, but
Yeah.
the beautiful kind of, it was a fluted mirrored tile, and it gives us this beautiful anisotropic reflection, as you can see in this image, as the reflection of the spherical light is sort of spread in this horizontal line, and it does that with the reflections of the bottles and the glasses. It's sort of a really special look, but it was pretty challenging to find the right
Yes. Well,
tile.
they ended up all having to be cut by hand. So that was a mission in itself. I mean, obviously a professional mirror company did it, but it was
Yes.
no. But honestly, I think that the design was such a great design. I think the hardest thing was the time factor, as Kasra said, because we had to do the first fix of all the electric work. We had to tell them exactly, do lighting plans, because they had to put all the wiring into the set, because everything had to be obviously practical. So when the lighting department are snipping at your heels, saying, "Where's that lighting plan? What lights are you using?" And it's like, "Oh my God, we don't know."
Yeah.
That's always quite hectic. But I really enjoyed doing that as a set. I thought it was great fun, and I think all the crew really loved it, and I think the actors loved it too. I think they felt really at home in there, didn't they?
Yeah. And there's some great details like the bar that are, unfortunately, you don't get to see enough in the film. But Jilly and I worked on an advertisement that was like a partnership with the show that was for a real estate company called Zillow. And there's like a nice 90-second tour that was very satisfying to do on that advertisement, because we get to spend time looking at all of these details that were overlooked in the film, like the bar, and there's a lovely womb chair next to this custom record player that we made, and the little mechanisms that Jilly's team created with in concert with special effects within the kitchen. All that stuff, you hope that it comes through in the film, and often some of it will, but never. It's unlikely that you get all of it in. So it's nice when there's some other media that exploits that and you get to see it.
So did you do that Zillow commercial while you were working on the set? Or was it standing, or did you have to bring it back?
Was
and
part.
recreate it?
No, luckily it was there because there was additional photography happening. So that commercial was shot the day after the additional photography
we finished
finished.
photography, and then Kasra flew in, and and
I actually remember that then, because I know we were working on the additional photography and Los Angeles,
Yes.
and then speaking of, your crew had to send me some set dressing pieces for the additional photography in Los Angeles.
That's right.
And so I had a brief opportunity to work with you and your crew, and I was so impressed by the organization, the follow through. It was a delight, and it made it so easy for me. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I did get to experience that.
No, I mean, they are a great team. I think what's interesting when we try to, I think on every job you can improve your systems. And we try and set systems in progress, in terms of, I say I use a lot of Pinterest. I do private, because I think it's a really great way of researching images, and especially things that you can actually buy, because you can then go back to the Pinterest image and you know where it's from. Whereas if I'm just saving screenshots, I'm like, where was that from? So, we do Pinterest, and then we, do Google lists that we all share and Google Sheets that we all share. And it sort of makes the system faster. And when it's honed like that, it's quite an exciting environment because everybody can work so quickly. And we had a lovely young lady, Eleanor, who was our sort of main, I mean, she did lots of sets with me, but she also dealt with a lot of the fabrics. So we do a huge fabric pull of, what we think we might use. And then we literally had this massive space where we'd sort all the fabrics into the different colors. So if you wanted a blue fabric, you went to the blue cupboard and it was just full of like essentially blue fabrics. And actually that was a really, good way of storing stuff. And then in the prop room, we'd buy mid-century lighting, to renovate and things like that. So I think it's about, on a film of this scale, it's about honing the system so you can work fast. And if everybody's on the same page, I think that really helps.
Well, you're talking about sourcing materials and dressing. I'm just curious of what it's like to shop for 1960s American retro atomic furnishings in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Yeah, I mean, I think it's challenging doing America in the UK. And I think that, especially that period, because America, although it joined the war, it didn't go through the same sort of level. The UK was very poor after the war. And so our 60s furniture is it's very small. It's much smaller in scale than what was happening in America. So luckily now there's a lot of reproduction, and then there's collectors who are collecting. We'd get quite a lot of stuff out of the Netherlands, out of Amsterdam and shops in the Netherlands, and then the rest of Europe. Germany has very good mid-century stuff, but the English mid-century, a lot of it is much smaller in scale and not very dynamic. And then I also went to Milan, where we visited with some collectors, and we went to the Milan furniture show, which was super useful because we met with Noel, the furniture makers, and they were very supportive and helped us. So it's not all sitting here. It definitely has to be sought out. But the good thing is, because it's fashionable at the moment, I mean, that's good and bad. It's good that it's available, but it's bad because it's terribly expensive. So, that's another thing when you're working on a period that's fashionable at the moment. But we did ship stuff in from the States. And also we used because I do try to be sustainable, if one can be sustainable in the film industry. And I do think we all should do more for that. But where Marvel are good is they have warehouses that they've stored the stuff, and they normally store it very well. So one of the things we did at the beginning was literally go through the warehouses in America and the warehouses here and pull everything that we possibly could, to use again.
I saw a few pieces from Loki season 1, the little Saarinen tulip stool, and our receiving room bench, curved benches.
Yes.
And then I started studying the set photos. I didn't even notice that. And it put a smile on my face because yes, love to repurpose.
Yeah, I think repurposing is really good.
Yeah. And I did that set and I didn't even recognize it until I studied the still photos. So, but not only did you have to source materials, furniture, you had to make things practical and functional. Like in the kitchen, if we go back to the kitchen, you know, they're going to the refrigerator.
Yeah.
And the door is not a typical open the door right, left hand hinge. It's curved and it slides to the right side. Tell us like what the challenges were in your designing these sets and getting the function right, as well as incorporating that into the design.
Jille has, you know, a team of art directors that works for her, and this is something that it's not unheard of in the States, but I've seen it definitely more in the UK, where you know it's a little bit different. Whereas like sometimes the art department might do more of that in the US. Here, it's the art directors that work under Jille that did a lot of this sort of very elaborate kind of interior design, interior architecture, drafting work and modeling work. So, you know, the team that works under, again, Dan, it was Libby and James, and they were working on this for quite some time, drawing this kitchen up, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And please correct me, Jille, if I'm omitting someone. And it's just a lot to work out. And then, of course, special effects. Alistair Williams' special effects team was instrumental in kind of figuring out and working together to figure out how these mechanisms would actuate and what opens and what doesn't open and how it could be done practically.
Yeah, it makes it really interesting as a viewer to see something that actually a drawer that can open, even though you know that it's, you know, if you get something that you buy from the store versus manufacturing, ways to save costs can be the drawer just don't open. But that's not the case here.
Well, actually, it's worth pointing out that there were always a few things that opened, but a lot of it was non-practical, and one of the last-minute fire drills was in some of the walkthroughs that Matt, the director, did in the days leading up to principal photography beginning, because this is where principal began, was in this set. That was one of the last-minute requests, was for more of the drawers and cabinets to be practical. So Jille had to mobilize a big team at the last minute and go into this. A lot of late nights to accommodate that. And whether it shows up in the final film or not, I mean, I think it does to a degree, but also it's just about facilitating the blocking, which is really important for the actors to feel comfortable and in the space, and that they can behave naturally as one would in a kitchen.
Well, it definitely needed to function, the space, because there's a lot of eating scenes, and these scenes are important because it kind of humanizes the heroes, our four heroes. And then, but then there's Herbie, the human experimental robot who can cook, clean, build, he protects. He's an extension to the family. Was Herbie a original Marvel comic character, or did the art department design, or was it kind of a combination of both?
So Herbie was, you know, as you know, Claudia, that Marvel has a really brilliant, talented internal visual development team led by Ryan Meinerding. And so they are there developing kind of key art, sometimes for years before a project reaches the kind of traction to go from development into pre-production. And so one of the things that was designed by and large, really, when I began the job, was Herbie. And Herbie is a real character, but if I understand correctly, he was not a real character in the original comics run, but that he was a character that was introduced a bit later, I think in the 70s, in an animated show. And so that's why you might kind of notice, certainly to me it felt this way, that some of the silhouettes and industrial design form language on Herbie are slightly anachronistic for the mid-60s. They feel slightly later. And I think that's part of it, because it was a tricky thing to needle to thread to fit into our world, and yet honor the source material for that character. It's again worth mentioning that Herbie was an absolute feat for the special effects department as well. So Ryan's team had designed this really cool robot, and it was Alistair's team who built. If I remember correctly, it was maybe 5 different versions of Herbie. Everything from something that was basically just puppeted by hand to something that was fully kind of robotically controlled by 4 or 5 operators, each with different remote controls, one to translate him through a space, one to articulate his head and facial expressions, one that controlled his arm movements. I mean, it was a super involved process to try to do this practically, which was a big priority for Matt. So yeah, I would say the art department involvement, to be completely honest, is somewhat limited with Herbie. But it was an impressive piece of work by Ryan's team and then later by Alistair's team.
Well, he blended into the environment really well, and I loved watching him baby-proof the house.
Yeah, it was a great
I'm sure you
sequence.
must have come up with some of those ideas.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk a little bit, or just point out that there's a consistency throughout the design of the Baxter building that and the show itself, that there are no flat walls in this movie. You really embraced shapes in the architecture and the furnishing, such as like circles, spears, arches, domes, like bold configurations in the layouts of the room. These shapes really invoke movement. Was that what your design intention was here? Or did it just naturally take place coming up with these shapes? I mean, the props, throughout the props and the monitors that we'll see, it just seems like it's a repetitive consistency.
Yeah. No, that was 100% intentional. And basically, one of the things that became very clear to me, it's always very helpful when you have these sort of like lighthouse ideas that click early in a project. But this is one of these ideas that became clear to me in my early conversations with Matt Shackman, our director, is that the look of this world. So this is an alternate American mid-century, right? And the reasons, what we had to figure out is what's different about this mid-century America than the mid-century America that actually came to pass in history. And what we determined was that the birth of Reed Richards was essentially that inflection point. And that, so, if you imagine he's in his mid-30s in the mid-1960s, then that means he's born sometime around 1930. And you figure that in his late teens, he starts to, he's this like Oppenheimer meets Da Vinci figure who's the breadth and depth of his knowledge is singular, and his influence on the world that he lives in is like very few others that have come before. And so if you imagine that he's that person that sometime around 1950, when he's 20, is when his impact on the world starts to really register. So based on that kind of long preamble, we said, okay, everything that's in New York that sort of exists pre-1945, pre-1950 is exactly the same. So you have turn of the century architecture, you have Art Deco architecture, you have a lot of pre-war architecture that's exactly the same as New York, the New York that we all knew. But that as we get into the 50s and then certainly into the 60s, the hand of Reed Richards is felt more. And that's everything from things that maybe he designed himself, like the Baxter Building or the Excelsior rocket or the Fantastic Car, but also things that are maybe informed by the technologies that he's innovated. So that's why you have it in the infrastructure of the city. You have a monorail system, and the kind of support structures for this monorail system are these giant kind of pre-stressed concrete parabolas. All of that stuff is meant to feel consistent and cohesive because it's meant to be kind of connected back to Reed Richards and the fact that what's fundamentally different about this world is that this person was born in this world. As you pointed out, Claudia, the kind of accelerating curves, like we stayed away from radial arcs and did everything was a conic section, like parabolas and ellipses and these sort of curves that are always in a state of acceleration. They're not uniform. They don't have like a uniform movement. They start at a speed and then they accelerate, they get faster. And that's this way where you can kind of infuse the image with a sense of dynamism and motion without even explicitly saying anything. I think that's what I think, at least.
So now we're looking at the establishing shots of is this establishing shot of the Baxter building?
This is actually a piece of a concept art by one of our brilliant illustrators, Josh Veers. And this is one of the establishing shots. Yeah, you can see. Absolutely. Yeah.
And you can see there out in the water is the
Excelsior
launch pad, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so that relation there is everything sort of in their world is close by, it looks like.
Yeah.
And some of that is like inspired by the source material, of course. In that, in the Baxter building in the comics, there was a rocket that actually launched literally from the top of the building itself. Oh. And so, we deviated from that explicit depiction of a rocket coming out of the top of the building, but it was important to capture the spirit of that idea. But try to ground it in this slightly more kind of grounded rendition of these characters in that world, which is why the rocket's next to the building and on the East River and not actually coming out of the building.
Well, now that we're outside of the building, maybe we can go look at some of the street scenes, starting with your version of maybe a Brooklyn neighborhood.
Is it Yancey Street? So the Yancey Street is actually the Lower East Side. It's
okay.
It's Yancey Street is supposed to be Delancey Street, really. Yeah. And so it is in the the southern part of the island. And the idea here, as you can see from this concept art, is that it's the retrofuturism, the kind of grand technical ambitions have sort of not been an integral part of this neighborhood, that this neighborhood has like a nostalgic warmth to it. And it's neighborhoody and the people all know each other. And it's it's historically a Jewish neighborhood from the source material. But we thought it was important. Jille really spearheaded this in proposing what some of the individual businesses were, that it was like a multicultural neighborhood, which is so critically, a part of the New York identity. But that you can see over the tops of the buildings into the adjacent neighborhoods where you do see those kind of retrofuturistic spires and the parabolas of the monorail system and all that, but not here in kind of sleepy, cozy Yancey Street, which is where Ben Grimm hails from.
Well, to make it cozy, then that's where Jille comes in. Jille, can you explain the level of set dressing and the awnings, signage, what you had a part of here for dressing?
Yeah, so we obviously had two big street sets to do, and this was the first one, which was obviously slightly smaller than Times Square and all around there. But we had great fun because we can sort of decide, and we work with the graphics team when we decide what's going to be in each shop. So this takes me back to when I was a little girl and I used to play shops. So I still get to play shops, which we all hugely enjoy, all of our team really enjoy. So, we have the restaurants, we have the hardware store, we have the tailors, we have the bakeries, and I wanted to make it multicultural. So we had Italian, we had Puerto Rican, we had a Jewish baker, we had the synagogue, we had an underwear shop, we had the shoe repair shop, we had the dry cleaner. And then we had Maisie's Deli, and all of the shops the graphics team did an incredible job. All of the graphics are designed individually, Or we had special awning companies make the awnings. And then each shop is decorated within an inch of its life with detail, because I think it's important that the director has the opportunity of putting a camera inside to shoot out. So really the whole, once you get all the cars and the extras in there, it just looked very real. And
Mhm.
and we really enjoyed that whole, it was a great process. Yeah. And
Did you have to build this or was there a backlot that existed?
it was a backlot set that
Mhm.
Kasra basically sort of redesigned quite a lot of the frontage.
Yeah, there was a modern New York backlot piece for this one that we'd inherited from Deadpool. It was kind of contemporary West Village, I think it was. And so, I think we were going for quite a different look with the Lower East Side and in the period, but it was incredibly helpful to have that to start from, things like the roads and the sidewalks, which are sort of expensive and don't often contribute as much to the image. It was very helpful that that was there already. But honestly, like, because the page count, as you know, like the page count is a big part of how you allocate resources. Because the page count for this set sort of fluctuated and ultimately ended up being slightly less, we had less money to spend on this in construction than we initially were planning to. And so it became all the more important that the decor stood in to really give it personality and make it come to life, and give it that richness, which I think it did admirably. This was a challenging one also to solve in terms of palette, because there's a kind of a cool silvery quality to the city on its own and to Times Square, but this place needed to feel backdated and warmer. So there's a lot of Hopper-esque kind of earth tones that are driving this, and it's always a challenge when you're living in that world, and yet you don't want to repeat yourself and you don't want to exclude blue, for instance, because then it becomes too stylized. So that was a conversation between paint selection, the decor, and of course the graphics, whose graphics were incredible for this and for Times Square, by our amazing team led by Karis Theobald.
Yeah, the graphics and signage are.
They were. I mean, on all of the sets, the graphics were just amazing. The graphics team, I mean, they worked tirelessly. I mean, it was a lot of work. Every single font and letter, was designed. It was incredible.
Yeah, and then the cars, they're vintage cars. Did you have to ship cars in from the US, or did they exist?
It's interesting because we didn't ship cars in from the US, is the short answer. We thought it was going to be really challenging to find enough, left-hand drive period American cars, but we had a fantastic picture car coordinator, and he had a deep Rolodex, and he was able to pull quite a lot of things. I think a lot of them
private collectors, I think.
Private collectors, that's right. And a lot of them came from Northern Europe, again, like some of that collectible furniture that Jille was talking about. But one thing we learned that was surprising is this checker cab, for instance, that you see. According to our picture car coordinator, that we had over 20 of these checker cabs. And they said that there's more of them in Europe than there are in the States anymore because of the collectors.
Interesting.
So,
yeah, we thought for sure we weren't going to be able to get these. And then it turned out we had plenty of these checker cabs.
That bus is so great. So if we zoom out and talk about this giant Times Square that you created, we could start with talking about the giant monitors with, we've got a monorail, the monitors, huge oversized billboards.
Yeah, this was it was a really fun and challenging kind of undertaking to figure out, like, what is it that makes, at least in the eyes of modern audiences, what is it that makes Times Square feel like Times Square? And in the modern era, I think you can't divorce the screens from Times Square. I think you can look at old pictures of Times Square, and it was always has been awash in advertisement. But the screens are a really kind of important part of what it is in the minds of modern audiences. So we wanted to try to reverse engineer what that meant. You know, what is the look of a screen in the in this alternate mid-century? And so there are tons of advertisements and neons and billboards that are illuminated, actuated billboards. But then we also wanted to find a way to have these retro feeling giant screens. And in my mind, I thought it would be really funny if they looked like CRT monitors, like glass cathode ray, giant glass cathode ray screens. And that it would be an important way to keep in the audience's mind the period that we were in. And we built one of those practically. It was 50 feet tall.
Whoa.
And that's kind of central one. That one there.
Oh, great. Wow.
And the rest of them were put in by Scott Stockdike's brilliant VFX team. But yeah, you know, like those illustrations you were showing early on, it's like it was this kind of dance to figure out what's the balance of retro New York? Like you can see here, there's plenty of brick buildings, you know, pre-war buildings, some turn of the century architecture. And then what's the balance between that and the parabolic monorail and the, you know, there's a famous kind of UFO Gucci style kind of vernacular that we wanted to bring to this set as well. And it's a UFO saucer shaped diner that we brought in. There's just always this kind of push and pull because you wanted it to feel like the world we were creating for Fantastic Four. And yet you don't want to give up its identity as New York. It needed to be both of those things. People needed to recognize it as both of those things. That was the kind of line we were straddling.
Yeah, and I'm seeing it here looking at your street lights and your traffic signals. Those are your typical New York. But then in one shot, I saw a phone booth that had a retro phone booth that you did build, because I saw that it was in front of a blue screen. So I do see and I appreciate the balance that you guys have found here with the retrofuturism versus the traditional New York skyscraper buildings. And so Jillian and Kasra, tell me, how much did you build of this? How tall was the set? I know you said you had the 50-foot monitor, but how high did you go up for the buildings? And then how much space did it go back? And then what was an set extension in visual effects?
You know, so we built the whole of Times Square at 2/3 the scale of Times Square. So it was a 360 set, but of course there were blue screens down the roads because the roads stopped at some point. We built to 30 feet as a minimum, and then there were places where we went up as high as 50, in a few places. Gosh, Jilly, maybe you'd remember. I can't remember the number of storefronts it was now.
Yeah, I mean, I see in my head, I'm thinking, you know, around 50, but honestly, I can't. The scale of this set was sort of terrifying. And also for construction to get this built and then hand over to SETDEC was very challenging. And I remember I had this wonderful assistant set decorator, Jesse Esmond, who looked after this set. She really spent the whole movie doing this one set, and it was an absolute labor of love. So we, worked with graphics to again decide, which shops, and then we'd go through suggestions of shop types with Kasra, and then graphics would start working on, and we would start working on the dressing. But one weekend, which I think probably was about 2 weeks before shooting, we'd only just been given the set. And I know that Jess was sort of desperately worried about, was she going to be able to achieve this? So I got all my team together. There were probably about 30 of us, in my sort of main set deck team. And I said, can everybody work this Saturday? And most people said yes. So we got permission from production to work. And then we got coffees and we got food delivered. And everybody of the team worked in a different shop. And throughout the whole day, we blocked every single shop. And at the end of the day, Jess couldn't believe it. I mean, we didn't finish it, but she knew that she had enough stuff, and it was, do you know what I mean? So she had sort of, another 8 or 9 days to refine it. But we'd sort of broken the back of it. And honestly, it was our best dressing day on the whole film, because the feeling of because the guys who, like, the art directors were dressing, and the people doing all sorts of other jobs that there aren't necessarily on set dressing came on set to dress, and they all absolutely loved it. They all had a great time, and we had music playing and we had snacks, and we were like, just had a great day doing this. And the detail that the team put into it, and also, we had interiors of hotels, which actually you never see, inside the hotel, but if Kasra builds it, we dress it.
Yeah.
No space is left undressed.
It's true. They're so beautiful. There's 2 hotels that we like. It was a funny. This is part of the joy, as you know, Claudia, and like I remember, Jille and Jess would put together a presentation with boards of what every shop's going to be, and swatches of fabric and tile samples and references. And it's so much fun to go and see there and see them together in the sequence that they would be, and imagine them. And there's just so much narrative in each of these environments. And I can't overstate how much Jess and Jille, of course, had to do with what the identity of these shops were. Because, like, I think maybe Jess thought about those things maybe certainly more than I did. I think more than anybody in many ways, scrutinizing these things.
Yeah.
And it was this palpable kind of story that you could, if you paid it close enough attention, you could see. There's an interplay between things like Layton's, which you can see in this image, which was like an actual place that was in New York, and the Forum Theater and all these other theaters. We did like 4 theaters that were like important Whelan's drugstore that were kind of landmarks of Times Square, Horn and Hardart Automat. But then we needed all these other interiors to anchor those and to tell the other kind of stories of the city, whether it's the retrofuturism of it, or it's the multiculturalism of it, or all the other kind of socioeconomic parameters that you need to get across. And like so much of that was done through these storefronts that Jille and Jess made. And so this is a long-winded way to talk about these hotels, but so this is represented by these 2 hotels that we did. And one is kind of the Waldorf Astoria. Basically, there's this beautiful hotel and beautiful interiors in it that you could shoot an entire scene in there, at a bar, at a dining area, whatever. Unfortunately, it doesn't end up in the film. And then there's like a low-rent tourist hotel that we did too. It was really funny.
I loved it. It was really funny, that one. Yeah. Like, no taste in there.
Yeah, it was tacky and grimy, and it looked like you could get hepatitis in there.
That's what's fun about that decoration. You get into all this crazy detail. It tells a story, and sometimes nobody sees the crazy detail, but with set decorators, it's always there. We're not going to leave it, unloved.
Yeah.
So
and it's this self-satisfying feeling that we get, even if it's not seen on screen. And speaking of not seen on screen, I know you did your 2 hotels that you just spoke about, but there's a lot of sets that were not shown in this movie that got cut. And I'm hoping, the only reason why I know this is because I worked on the additional photography, and I had some involvement in some of those sets. So I hope that they'll be seen in other Marvel movies in the future, because from what I saw, the work that you did was amazing and really interesting to look at. And it was almost like a different world, another world within this movie. So
Subterranea specifically was a massive undertaking in this huge mine 3 hours outside of London. And
incredible. The location that we went to was an underground mine. It's the deepest underground mine in the UK. And you had to drive in for 12 minutes in a car. You drove 12 minutes into the ground,
inside the mine. Yeah.
Inside, so you were going underground for 12 minutes before you got to, we were like, oh my God, it was quite freaky. And then Maggie, my lovely assistant set decorator, and Fergus, one of my main assistants, they just did a spectacular job. And it was hard dressing this because it's freezing in there all the time. The temperature never goes up. And getting all of this stuff into the mine and then dressing it all was, and it looked great. I mean, you didn't see a lot of it in the film, but my God, it was a great set.
Those lights with all the wire, like the cabling.
Yeah,
I love the round lights. They look, it looks great. Well, since we're talking about this, let's look at Harvey Mullman's desk, since he's in the Subterranea. I just love the set and the shot of the desk and his environment.
So Mullman's environment, we shot in this very deep mine, and we had a bus which we stripped the interior out, and then we dressed the whole scene in the bus. So we gave Matt, our director, a choice of either shooting the scene with Mullman in the bus, and he also had a platform outside, and it was sort of that he was like a union guy, and he had lots of filing cabinets and lots of dressing on his desk, lots of cool lighting, and a lot of detail surrounding him, that he was really part of the real world. And I thought it was quite interesting that he was an alternative character, that the mole people live underground and there's all this glamorous world going on top. But the glamorous world is only happening because the mole people are doing, connecting all the sewers and, sorting out all the electricity. So there's this whole underworld. And I thought that was quite an interesting concept. And he was a great character. So we didn't see as much of his world as I would have liked to, because the effort of dressing in a freezing cold mine, is quite challenging. But it was a really great set, and I think really added that level of non-glamour but utilitarianism to the film.
Yeah, the one thing that the reason why I really love this imagery of him sitting at the desk is that it shows how much of the character's personality we bring to the film. And it might not be someone who exists in the real life, but we have to make him up. And I thought every piece that you put on this desk or platform or whatever it was had such a nice balance with texture. It was very interesting. I wanted to freeze the scene so that I could check out all these interesting pieces.
Yeah, no, I think it does. I mean, the fact is it was a great location, but then, there wasn't really very much. The construction built the base platform, but really everything in that scene, and Maggie and mainly Maggie chose a lot of the dressing, and then a lot of idiosyncratic pieces, and I think really gave it personality. I think, for set decorators, that backstory that we give, we read the script and we translate the script and obviously the designs from the designer, but I think that we give it our own backstory. And I think maybe to do our jobs well, we have to believe, we have to understand the character and make the character believable for ourselves, and putting the detail in. That's how we do it. And then hopefully, I certainly think our director, Matt Shackman, loved that, because he's a very humane director. He's, he's very emotional person in his directing, and he loved all of that detail. I think it really helped him direct the characters. And so, yeah, no, that was one of the, but I think with all of the sets we did, there was quite a lot of much smaller sets, some of which we did on the reshoots, which were sets just with a TV and with people watching what was happening in the world on their TV. And then we did the TV studios of the news presenters. And that was, I remember we had like, just over 10 days to put together 12 sets from a standing start. I was like, oh, where did this come from? We just thought we were going into the reshoots to do, a few redressing. And then suddenly I had like 10 new sets to do. And that was, but we were on a roll then because we knew where all the stuff was. By the time you've done nearly a year's work of mid-century sourcing, you bloody know where everything is. So that was sort of, it was like flexing a muscle. It was, really good fun. Yeah.
Well, actually, speaking of the reshoots, there was one set that I did. I worked on just a really small part, and that was in the Future Foundation, the assembly hall.
Yes.
I reupholstered 3 theater seats to match your seat color and the shape. We had to build foam to get that shape and then upholstered over it and put it over theater seats.
Yeah, well, this is a real location.
Okay.
And those seats were, this exists. This is Calatrava building, the architect Calatrava. And it exists in northern Spain. So we all went to northern Spain, and all of those, that theatre completely exists. And all we did was we carpeted the stage. There was the backing, we did the flags, and we designed the podium. And then we did all the standing flags. So it was an amazing location to dress.
It's incredible because it looks like, I knew that you could not have possibly built this because the price of this to build this set, but it blends in so well with the rest of the architecture.
Genius. I thought this was a genius location.
Yeah. Well, I studied those blue seats. My buyer, Amy Strong, went all over Los Angeles and found the perfect color. So I don't think you even noticed. I don't think you even noticed that we had, I wanted to do you justice and I didn't want
to
mess up your beautiful sets. Let's go into Reed Richards' lab.
Ah, yes. This was the one that nearly finished us off.
Well, there's a lot I want to talk about in this lab, but it's like no other lab I've ever seen in reality or on screen. Let's talk about the thing that stands out most to me and the color division here. Can you tell me what each design area represents?
Kasra, you tell her. It was your child, this.
So the idea here is that there are 3 distinct areas for work. And you can see here, we're looking sort of from the back of the space to the front. You can see the elevator there in the distance here. And so when you come out of the elevator, the first thing that you're in is the red area, which is a space for essentially messy work. Prototyping, electronics, robotics, chemistry, like all the stuff where the tools are involved and chemicals are involved. That's what happens here in this area. And the red, I guess, on some level indicates danger. So you can see here, there's the MRI machine that he's prototyping just now. Also, you can see there's a prototype on the table of the bridge portal that ultimately becomes a critical part of the 3rd act of the film. The yellow area there in the center is a space for contemplation and for discussion. There are these kind of stacked chalkboards that ascend and descend because he's got different projects on each. And opposite the chalkboard is a kind of large seating area where you can sit and think about it, or if the rest of the team come in for a meeting, they'll have it there in this yellow area. And it was important that the chalkboards be chalkboards, not dry erase boards, because it was like we wanted to contrast the kind of futurism of the space with the kind of undeniably analog quality of a chalkboard. And then finally, the blue area is the sort of mission control. It's where all the computer technology is. where the systems in the Excelsior rocket are monitored, where communication to the rest of the world is, where space is monitored. All of that happens here. And this was I mean, this image tells the story. It was an incredibly difficult thing for Jille's team to bring to life. It was a kind of a combination inspiration of Luigi Colani's kind of very hyper monolithic work where everything is like a single piece of fiberglass seemingly, and the kind of accelerating, again, parabolic curves of Saarinen's work. All of that comes together. You can kind of see fatefully there's a part line. If you look behind those spherical monitors, you can see this black part line that runs through, and basically everything inside of that part line was built by SETDEC. And on the other side are these kind of the rings themselves, which are these fiberglass pieces built by construction. And this is always the challenge, is finding the place to break the work between the departments. And then they're then made separately by different artisans. And then the challenge is always then bringing them together and marrying them together in a way that fits really well. And that was just a huge amount of effort and planning by so many really brilliant people. I mean, Jille's assistant decorator, Fergus, who was kind of running the set, I mean, brilliant artist, brilliant manager, unflappable in the face of everything, just such a steady hand, and a joy to talk to no matter how stressful the day. The poor guy must have lost a month of life working on this set. It was a really, really challenging set in that there were so many moving parts, all of this practical, all very, very technical, almost nothing you could just buy off the shelf. You know, like even the decor there, you can see these electronics sitting on the table, the tools, all of it got painted, all of it got interacted with, all of it had a layer of graphics. There was just nothing kind of off the shelf in this space. And
how did you keep the paint from not chipping?
I don't know that we did.
I could just imagine a grip walking by and scratching it with his or her equipment.
I think looking at this set, what I would say is, I think architecturally this set is so stunning. And looking at it in retrospect now, and I think, wow, construction, Kasra designed and the art directors drew up and construction built this set. It was a truly amazing set. So then what was interesting was the detail, so talking about the concept coming to reality. So we had the concepts of this, but the art department didn't really have time. We had to go straight into drawing and modeling it, and turning the concept into the reality was a very hard thing because at the beginning, my guys just didn't know how to draw it. They were complex curve on complex curve, and then curved things coming out of the curve. It just took, if you did this in a reality, say you were building this in a hotel or I don't know, or this would take months of research to work out how to do this. And my guys had 4 weeks to get this drawn up. I mean, it was sort of madness. They absolutely did it. And with Fergus, running this and the brilliant model making team. The other thing is that my main model making team couldn't do a lot of this work. So we had to outsource it to another vendor. And I think that was probably the most stressful thing because the main model making team were doing the Excelsior because both sets needed to be ready at the same time. It was completely unforgiving. So going out to an outside vendor, and I remember at 11 o'clock, Kasra was still there and we were just finessing, and there were things that still needed doing, and the vendors were going to leave. And I said to Fergus, stop those people leaving now. They can't leave till it's finished. We had to get them back. And, and obviously with your own team, they will just give you, 200%. But with an outdoor vending team, honestly, they want to get back to, to their life. So that was quite a funny moment. I said, lock the doors, don't let anybody out. It was a very challenging set. And I mean, personally, I couldn't have done it without Fergus and the team, because it was really technical and very complex. And now it looks so easy, but
It
honestly,
doesn't look easy at
there
all.
were really times
It
where
does
I was
not look
like,
easy. I can
yeah,
promise you that. But it's interesting again that you see the your CRT monitors and with the convex lens and the spherical monitors. I feel like that is like, but maybe modeled off of those video sphere televisions that were out in the 60s, those space age ones. And I love that. And I love that you did different shapes. They almost look like little bubbles. It's interesting. Everything in here is I mean, we could look at this for hours. There's so much to look at, and you can tell how much work you put into it. Even the chalkboard being curved. I don't even.
And it moved.
I don't even know how that works.
It was very challenging, and I'm still to this date, I don't know how quite they all pulled it off, but honestly, what an amazing, a great effort by art department, model making, special effects. I mean, the whole visual effects, the whole thing was, I think, a triumph.
I also love how you have the colors, they define the space, but then on the perimeter, everything is white, including the ceiling. So it really makes you, as a viewer, focus in on the work areas, which sometimes in my life, I need that too. Like in my office, I need no clutter on the perimeter, but yet I need that my workspace to be the defined space and that I can focus on. And I feel like that is really obvious here. And I like that about this set a lot. I mean, I love everything about it, but you can't even see these amazing ceilings. You completely built these ceilings, didn't you?
Yeah, they were. Yes, we did. And this set was a 360 set. It was about 20 feet at the tallest point. So it wasn't super tall. And part of that is because I wanted them to be in the shots. But also, part of this is like it needed to feel, fortified, because he is doing dangerous experiments in this space. And it's a space within a building full of people, in a city full of people, and wanted it to feel sort of like absorptive in a way. Like if something exploded, it could contain the blast to this room. So even the windows are like this textured glass, because the idea is that the glass is 4 feet thick. I always, it was always intended, you can see from the concept art, to be a white space, but we sort of assumed it would be painted. But when the brilliant plaster team started their work, they made these things. The best material to use for these cast ceilings ended up being plaster. And when I saw the surface of the plaster, it was so beautiful. I just knew we couldn't paint it, because the surface, a cast surface like that is sort of living. We burnished it. And so it had like a shimmer to it, where the high spots became reflective as it was burnished, and the lower spots stayed matte. And so there's all this movement and depth and richness to it. Whereas if you just paint it white, you create like a dead surface that doesn't have any of that depth. So the plasterers were thrilled that we didn't want to cover their work. They were, I think, quite proud of that. But the downside of it is it became a lot harder for them, because all the patching work had to then be also plaster and be very carefully done, as opposed to, like, if you're going to paint it, you can be a lot more, the means of joining the pieces can be a lot more forgiving. So it was a huge amount of work for them, but they took a palpable pride in it, and as they should, because their work was spectacular. I haven't seen anything like it.
Me neither. There is, when you were talking about matte versus like a glossy finish, there is a lot of like the glossy finish seems to be your manufactured, more space age vehicles, and then we go into the lab and this high gloss finish. But then when you're in the living space, it's more of a matte finish. So I just found that interesting because there's a lot of that going on throughout the film. And then I think this would be a good time to start talking about the Excelsior spaceship.
Yes.
So this is the Excelsior launch pad. Are you calling the Excelsior ship a rocket? Like, would you say it's a rocket ship? Okay. All right. And then the interior build is, I'm just curious how big this set is. And is it one?
Yes.
I know that you can take it apart in pieces, but did you, when it was on stage, was it put together as one big room set?
Okay.
It was a single room with the kind of cockpit came off because the cockpit had to go on a gimbal at some point. But it was a contiguous set most of the time.
All the details that went into the console here and throughout, it's just so textural and dimensional. Why don't you tell me about the challenges and about this set and how it came together?
Sure. So this set was, just as a quick overview, there was a challenge from a design philosophy standpoint on this set because, it's a rocket or a space shuttle, which is a very specific type of workstation, the design of that is based on something that is designed to exit an gravity and exit an atmosphere. It's very plane-like in terms of what the design requirements of something like that are. But the thing is the Excelsior also functioned as a zero-G workstation, which is very different. It's sort of more like a space station. So if you look at the ISS or something like that, it's a completely different look than something like the space shuttle. So we were kind of combining those two requirements. And the other thing that was super important is that we didn't want this to feel like a prototype in the way that so much of early space stuff like the Apollo era stuff does. And even in the modern era, you look at the ISS, things have an informal look to them. Like they're still figuring out what you need to build a space station. Whereas like we wanted this to feel that for Reed Richards and for the world that he's built, space travel is commonplace in the way that airplane travel is commonplace in our world. And so it's been industrial designed. All the ugly wires and bits are hidden away because he has such command of this technology that he can do that. So it was a combination of the space shuttle and a workstation that needed to be able to look like it could work in zero G. And so much of that came through the layers of set dressing, in particular, the amazing upholstery work that was done in this set. Which is like an indication of a space where you're floating around in zero G, you're banging into things, which is why it was important that things get padded and upholstered. And as people have seen the film there's a birth scene in here. There's lots going on in zero G. So yeah, that's the kind of gist of it. But Jille, I'll let you take it from here. There's a small ocean of work that Jille's team had to do in this set as well.
Yeah, so Fergus, he got all the tricky sets. And my lovely assistant, Nathan, were running this set and the model makers just, it was endless amounts of work. But there was a funny story that when they first started shooting on this set in the cockpit, and the actors and spoke to Matt, our director, and they said, how do we fly the Excelsior? So they called us and said, could you send someone down? And they asked Nathan, how do you fly? He said, okay, I'll go and sort a manual out for tomorrow. And then he came back to the office and he wrote a manual. It was all absolute rubbish because it wasn't a real spacecraft, but he went through all the buttons of how to fly it. And then the next day gave the actors the manual and they were, okay, so this is how we take off. We were all thought that was absolutely hilarious.
I want to see that manual.
He just believed this,
Okay.
was a spacecraft. They put so much work into it that they really, it became a reality,
That is a great set dressing story.
Yeah.
And shows how much we get into our sets and we live in
Yes.
them and we think about this all the time. So and we make things up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This was the model making. I mean, from Kasra and the art department, and then into model making, special effects, and my team, finding all the lighting, all the buttons, so every single detail was extraordinary.
And then the Mr. Fantastic Science.
Ah, yes.
So I mean, this set is just when this set came up on the screen when I watched it the first time in the theater, I just gasped. I love everything about it. From the flooring to the kids' desks to the rocket engine that you built, and the stunning green chalkboard that is clearly a build, because I have not seen that in the real world.
The desk and the blackboard were built, and the graphics team, did that print at the back, and then they also printed the floor. So it's interesting when you get, the talented team giving you those elements, and then they did the wonderful sign, and yeah. So this was great, and then we built the rocket ship model makers on the counter. And the desk was really a work of art because it was a sort of triangular shaped, but it was like floating on these legs. And that was, this is as a piece of furniture, we don't get time to do a prototype. If you were designing furniture in the real world, you would get to do prototypes and trial out what works. I mean, these guys have to get it right, first time, which is, really challenging. Yeah, this was a really fun set.
It is such a fun set. And from someone who works on sets a lot, you can look at this and say that it looks expensive, but there are no walls. You just have and this happens quite a bit. Yeah, this happens quite a bit with set decorators where there isn't enough money to build a wall.
Right.
So we put curtains up instead to divide a space. And in this case, it works really well. I like that there's a curtain behind him and it softens it up, and maybe he could be doing this on a stage or something. But I really think this is such a cute, and I love I'm assuming that they're custom made, your starbursts that you hung up.
Yes, yeah, they were.
How did you get those to hang up there without pulling drape?
Yes, they were on wires, and then they attached some sort of pinning system to the back, so that, but very delicately. And then when they first made them, the model makers, they were like really chunky, and we're like, no, they've got to be much finer. So they remade them, and they were brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They just like add that, so you're not just looking at a curtain. And then did your team build the engine that?
Yes, well, actually, we bought an engine, and then special effects did an amazing job, recladding it. So we started with something. We started with a jet engine, but then it was a complete makeover to get it to look, not just like a jet engine. And I think it was really successful what they did with it.
Yeah, and it's humorous too, which I love, and playful and sweet. As we know, that's kind of something that Kasra is very good at.
And I think one of the things that we haven't talked about, which was obviously huge, is with the costumes in this film. Because I think the blend of, the art direction, the set decoration, and the costume, it all has to work together. And Alex, our costume designer, just, she's just got wonderful taste. And I think all of the costumes look brilliant. It just looked perfect. You almost don't notice it because all of it looks right.
Yeah, you had a great team of creative department heads on this.
Yeah.
Jille and Kasra, I've had so much fun talking to you. Before we leave, is there any additional people you want to thank? Any of your vendors, crew members we might not have mentioned?
Oh, the list is so long, and I inevitably will forget people. But my amazing art department, my kind of brain trust of illustrators Josh Fears and Joe Sedzinski and Patrick Dunbaker and Jason Sweer is a graphic designer who I've worked with on everything since Loki 1. The art directors Nick Gottschalk, Liam Jorgensen, Alex Bailey, Oliver Goodyear, Laura Miller, so many amazing art directors that if I enumerated the entire art department, we'd be here a very long time. But needless to say, we had a staggeringly talented roster.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously all of my department, I had two wonderful girls called Daisy. I had my two Daisies who did Yancey Street, Jess and B who did Times Square, Fergus and Nathan, and all of the rest of me, Eleanor who worked with me, Candice who I mentioned. The graphics team were outstanding. Caris and her team, too many to mention, but they were absolutely outstanding. Jess, my SETDEC painter, it was a massive job for her and her team. And then the model making team, and then all of my dressing prop guys and girls, headed up by Ty, my property master, and his assistant property master, George. Just absolutely top-notch work. And everybody laughed, everybody, supported each other. And I think that is fundamentally what, makes a good team, is that the support and love we give each other. I think it's super important.
Well said.
I'm really excited to see what happens during this award season. And I wish you both the best of luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for doing it, Claudia.
Yeah, Kasra, so good luck on your commercial, and we'll
Thank you.
Okay.
We'll talk soon.
Bye, Kasra.
Bye, Jille. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Inside the Set with SETDECOR. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website, SETDECOR.com.